Lucinda, it's great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Stefan. Great to be here.
Yeah, again. It wasn't too long ago that you've been with us here on Harvest Program, and glad to have you back. Now, you say that in the role of a lifetime that no matter where we are stationed in life, no matter what task we have at hand, no matter what role we're playing right now, it can be a role of significance and eternal significance for anybody.
Well, I do believe that. That's why I wrote this book, is because we're created in the image of God. And He's infused each of us with unique gifts and abilities, and He places us in situations. And He says, live your story to the fullest. So I want people to realize that our lives are a story that matters. It matters for the kingdom. And that's why I wanted to encourage us to get in touch with where God has placed us.
Now, the word story, or the concept of story, so it's real important to we can communicate powerfully through the concept of story. I
believe very much that we really resonate with authentic storytelling. People, that's what they remember from a sermon. We've become a narrative nation. People gather to share their life stories with one another, and I think it's a good thing. Our Lord Jesus was a theologian who told stories, and He would use ordinary things to express deep truth, and we can communicate that way. Oh, we need to look at our lives as a story that God is scripting and that we are part of, and are we really living it to the fullest?
Yeah, yeah. For someone who doesn't like their storyline or the part that they've been given to play, so to speak, you know, what would you say to that person?
Well, what I would say is, first of all of us have probably at some point in life stepped back and said, oh my gosh, this is not the life I was supposed to live. What happened to what I was supposed to be and do? God, do you really know what you're doing? And that would be a person who looks at their storyline and says, what's going on? And I would say, do you trust the creator and sustainer of the universe? He is the author and finisher of our faith. He is the grand director, so to speak. And if He has enlisted you into this place, He will also equip you and empower you to live it out. Not just to survive where you are, but to thrive and to glorify Him.
How do we get ourselves past the feeling of our life is too mundane for the Creator to really care about us?
It's so true. We live in small stories. I mean, every day we're just trying to get by, aren't we? And we're trying to, you know, we're frantic and frenetic, and so we don't take time to think and to lift our eyes up. We need to move from the mundane, as you said, really into the magnificent. And how do we do that? And I would just encourage us to be conscious of what is going on in our lives. Maybe take some time to move beyond just coasting, just settling in life, but really be proactive about are you going to trust God to try this new thing? Are you going to risk? Are you going to go for it? Many people, when they reach a certain age and stage in life, they just say, been there, done that. I'm just going to kind of relax the rest of my life. And I would say that would be a mistake. Don't just coast your life.
And you also point out that there is a villain in our life, and I think this is something that churches don't talk about as often as maybe they should. There is somebody trying to hold you back, and that somebody is Satan.
Chuck, that is so true. In every great drama, there is a villain. And in the drama that is our lives, the villain is the enemy of our souls. And he will do whatever he can to distract us, to discourage us, to demoralize us, to whisper those accusations and lies in our ears so that we'll miss what God has for us. And we do often give in to the wiles of the enemy, of the villain. And we begin to believe those lies. And we say, oh, I could never do that. And so I really do caution us to see that there is a villain in our story, and yet God's power is greater. He says for us to put on the armor of God and to fight this battle against that which would prevent us. And so I really do encourage us to be the hero in the story, and because God is there to empower us to do that.
How important is it to kind of have that understanding of or interpretation of the things that have happened in our life as we're moving forward?
Well, that's a great question, Stefan, because one thing that can be so helpful, no matter what age we are, is to look at our life and the themes. You know, in the Bible, they talk about stones of remembrance, so that we can tell to the generations to come, this is what this stone of remembrance means. This is when God was faithful. This is what He did. Well, I encourage the reader, in Role of a Lifetime, to look back at different times in their life, to come up with seminal moments that made a huge difference in the path they chose. Even it could have been before they were a follower of Christ, how God's hand was on them. I have a whole area in the book called Backstory.
Right.
And backstory in drama is basically what was set into motion, what's happening now. And you know, as we look throughout the Bible, the backstory of Joseph's life, how it set into motion, what he went through, we need to go back and perhaps visit the backstory of our lives, but not live there.
You know, you actually went back to visit your childhood home.
I did.
What did you learn from that?
Well, I was writing this book last year, and I was realizing, you know, maybe I need to go back to this small town in Georgia and go to the house where the first 25 years of my life I lived. Hadn't been there in many years, and just as I walked through it, you know, this flood of memories, it was a time for me to realize that whereas my backstory was one of great encouragement and faith and a building up, I realized that many of us have backstories that are very different from that and very difficult, and you know, there have been abuse or great tragedy, and what we need to see is that we don't have to stay there wherever it is, that God is at work and He is the one that will heal us and enable us to move forward, but we may have to do some business there, and so it's a way to move forward. Yeah, it's a way to move forward, and it's also a way to see God's hand on your life through the years, and then to pass it on. I have 4 children, and they love for me to tell them stories of things that happened perhaps when I was young or when they were young. Tell me about when I was young. And this is what God did. And so I encourage us to do that and to tell these stories, these stones of remembrance.
You can maybe encourage an exercise of writing your own obituary.
I know. It sounds a little strange. I can remember, I actually did that first in a seminary class many years ago. You know, our story here on earth is part of the kingdom story. But even when we die and go home to heaven, it still continues and throughout eternity. And yet, what did it matter that I was here? So you write down your obituary and you go, wow, I'm not really sure that that's all I want to leave in terms of what people say about me. And so I would say it's never too late to write the story of the rest of your life. So begin living now the way you want to be remembered. And that means taking hold of life, moving forward, making a difference. And yet our stories matter for a kingdom. I use lots of film and literary illustrations in the book for the drama theme, and one of them is in the Chronicles of Narnia, when at the very end the children actually do go through a railway accident and they die, and as Aslan welcomes them, he says, you know, your whole life was in the Shadowlands. That was just the prologue to the story. Now chapter 1 begins, and that's in heaven. And so that's also part of it, is to get the full-orbed idea of the kingdom that is already but not yet, and how God, amazingly enough, wants to involve us in kingdom work right here and now. And how powerful is that? I mean, if we're sons and daughters of the King of Kings, we're princesses and princes, we're royalty, and we are the ones that God wants to use.
To live out that kingdom. Yeah. Going back to one thing, we just have a minute, Lucinda.
Okay.
Regarding risks. Now, I know that there are friends watching this very moment who are getting excited, thinking, you know what, I don't have to let the next chapter or the final chapters of my story be reflective of some of the earlier chapters. It can make a difference and a change. When it comes to taking those risks, have you heard and met people that their life story changed by just being willing to kind of jump out there and walk on the water a little bit?
Exactly. That's it, called the plot thickens. And in just a moment, the plot of your life can thicken, can change, the script can change, and that's where we have to trust God. That's where we have to look at that wonderful Pauline verse, 1 Corinthians 2:9, that says, you know, eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard, it hasn't even come into your heart what God has planned for you. And we have to trust that God has more. And then we have to live our life, a life of trust, a life of risk. I say, don't miss your life. You know, don't miss it. Embrace it. And go for it, because God is faithful and He is with us on the journey. And that's what's the most important thing. I don't know what it will mean to the person you mentioned that's listening, but God can show them what it will mean for each one of us, because once again, we are uniquely created. But we do matter to God. And so embrace your life story. Live it to the fullest. Glorify God. And if I can encourage all of us to do that, then we will, as David said, hopefully hear, well done, good and faithful servant.
And I think you have encouraged us in Role of a Lifetime, your part in God's story.
Thank
I want to
you.
thank you for joining us today, Lucinda.
Thank you so much, Stefan and Chuck. Great being with you.